To today's Energy Symposium, sponsored by the Energy Institute. I'm Kerry King, and it's a pleasure to have today's talk. This is the second to last talk, so there'll be one more talk next week. And that talk will be Richard Meyer of the American Gas Association. So we'll get a look at the sort of professional or industry association perspective on natural gas in the United States. Today we have a very special talk I'm excited to hear about. The talk today is from our UT journalism fellow, who is also an investigative journalist. So the University of Texas at Austin Energy Institute sponsors each year a what we call our journalism fellow, in which we have raised money to pay a journalist to take off from their full-time job of being a journalist, where they have to respond to last-minute journal or news articles and things that the editor wants done now or next week or something, and they get to take time off to spend time on a topic of interest that requires more depth and detail and understanding to effectively tell the story. And so we're going to hear about that today. So Eliván Martínez Mercado is our journalism fellow, and he's going to give us the story about thinking about Puerto Rico and the aftermath of Hurricane Maria and the issues related to the electricity sector there. So he's been doing this for about 15 years. He's covered issues in Puerto Rico outside of the electricity sector as well, issues around agriculture and farming and the treatment of the land in Puerto Rico. He's written for the USA Today, New York Times, Miami Herald, and so he has been around. He's written a lot of issues. As an investigative journalist, he has tried to focus on issues related to how things affect people on the ground, I guess, corporate decisions, and how this translates to people in the communities that are affected. And so before I turn it over to them, I will give a little bit of a shout out to 8th grade class of Laura Robinette Minor, the 8th grade class of Trinity Episcopal School, who found out about this talk, but of course they can't find the time to come here, but they submitted several questions that they thought would be relevant, and they actually are relevant, and I think Eliván's going to answer most of them. I'll just read off one of the questions here that he's going to talk about. As an 8th grader, I wish I could ask such a good question. There was no chance of me asking such a good question. It says, after a major storm or other natural disaster destroys the machinery for electric energy production, who is or should be responsible for the costs of rebuilding? I would have never thought to ask this question, I think, as an 8th grader. So this is just one of several questions that they asked related to how electricity is generated in Puerto Rico and what are the issues in generating electricity and serving customers on a small island. Should there be more than one company? Should there be one company? Who should own the company? All these kinds of things I would have never thought to think about. So we're going to learn about these issues right now, and I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to Eliván. So let's welcome him here and welcome him for this talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. Also, I want to thank the Energy Institute for this time for researching a little bit more and understand the issues in the island. And I work for the Center for Investigative Journalism, and it's the only media outlet that allows reporters to spend some time researching major issues that affect daily lives of the people down there. And on September the 20th, 2017, at about 3 a.m., I was with my wife and my daughter, and we were hearing many objects hitting the windows. We were leaving Hurricane Maria, and I thought that many people were going to die due to strong winds and floods. This is what we found the next day. I was wrong. Lack of power kills. Most of the people died due to lack of power in the hurricane that began right after Hurricane Maria. at this area. There were almost 3,000 deceased, and we're speaking about death in excess when compared to historical data, according to George Washington University, who conducted this study after the Puerto Rican government asked them to research what really happened in terms of the deceased. Also, the Center for Investigative Journalism made a special report, and we found that most of the deaths were directly related to lack of power, almost 40%. There was also an important study from Harvard University. Sick and elderly were the main victims. These were people who needed power to get medical care, power to operate, for example, breathing machines, power to get dialysis. And when you see this, this is what most of the people who were interviewed by the researchers of Harvard University, they actually said that unable to get medicine, unable to use respiratory equipment, doctors unavailable, unable to afford care, unable to have dialysis. So this is not only the largest blackout in the history of Puerto Rico and the U.S., it's also the largest blackout, the second largest blackout in the history of the world. 80% of the transmission and distribution system was destroyed, and this had a huge impact everywhere in the island because without power you cannot pump water. It's hard to provide communications, food distributions, and other areas. So the domino effect is very important when you have a massive blackout such as the one we had. And this is a map of 14 major storms we've had since 1852. And it is important to look at this before we knew what could happen. And this is going to happen again if we don't take some measures. And so Hurricane Maria had an important impact in the economy, 43 billion. And for example, for people living in the mountains, this means they cannot open their business at all. They need to get an emergency power generator. They need to buy diesel, buy fuel in order to open doors. We lost about 4% of the population right after Hurricane Maria. About 130,000 people left to the U.S. And this had a huge impact in the quality of life. For example, if you lived in the island and if you had $90, you buy a 250 watts inverter and you can charge your cell phone, your laptop, and you can turn on a small fan. That's it. So can you imagine living like this in rural areas for almost a year? So it is important, we cannot blame the current situation of Puerto Rico exclusively to Hurricane Maria. We were in a mess before Hurricane Maria. There's only one electric utility, which is PREPA, Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority. It was filing for bankruptcy in 2017, and it had $9 billion in debts to bondholders and $2 billion in actuarial deficit. And a couple years before Hurricane Maria, they were implementing austerity measures. This means they fired lots of employees, and they didn't have materials to cope with any disaster at all. For example, right after Hurricane Maria, there were not poles, no cables, no trucks, no helicopters, only a few helicopters. And also, since 1952, the people of Puerto Rico have been living under consecutive administrations of the Partido Popular Democrático, PNP, and Partido Nuevo Progresista. So these parties are responsible for the mismanagement and political interference in PREPA. There are also important allegations of corruption. So it's not true to say that Hurricane Maria made this damage, okay? This is an economic storm and then a real storm. So PREPA was built in the 40s and the 50s as part of the New Deal, and part of the purpose was to provide electricity people everywhere in the island. So this could help economic development. And we had a centralized grid structure. And now, considering the existing technology, this is a no-no. Why? Because 70% of the load is located in the metro area, and most of the generation is in the south. This means you need to bring the power from the south to north with transmission lines through the mountains. If you have a category 3, 4, 5 hurricane, the lines are going to be down, and you have a massive blackout. Our generation capacity, 6,000 megawatts. It's mainly oil, natural gas, and coal. We only have 4% renewables, including hydroelectrics, and I'm speaking about generation capacity, of course. And this 4% includes hydroelectrics, and PREPA is not using hydroelectrics. PREPA abandoned hydroelectrics and a few years ago. And this has important consequences in the economy because we need to spend money in natural gas, coal, and oil that we don't have. So we're also speaking about energy dependence here. Right now, we are among the 10 most expensive residential electricity rates in the U.S. We are here. The first is the U.S. Virgin Islands. So the near future will be like this. We're going to be here. Because since PREPA has to pay its debt and its actual deficit, it'll be about 6.5 more cents per kilowatt hour. Okay? And it has also important consequences because PREPA has a history of not being compliant with the EPA emission limits. All right? So almost every sector now, I mean, people from the universities and communities, environmental organizations, even PREPA, people from the legislature, they agree in this. We need to have cleaner energy, resilient. Of course, if you live the longest blackout in the history of Puerto Rico and U.S., resiliency is important. We're not speaking about 1 hour blackout. You know, I know people who spend actually a year without power. And it has to be affordable and an independent energy system. almost every sector also agrees on moving towards more renewable storage and distributed generation. They disagree on how to make it happen. Now, this is law. 2 weeks ago, Governor Ricardo Rosselló signed this bill. It's the first time we have a law that brings a certain kind of direction on where to go. And it finishes the PREPA's monopoly as the only provider of electricity. So now private organizations, individuals, NGOs, and co-ops can consume and generate. This is a major shift in the sector. They have set some goals, 50% renewable for 2040 and 100% for 2050. It will be with distributed generation, solar, microgrids, and they will finish generation with coal. Right now, we have a very controversial power plant in Guayama, which is AES coal plant. These are the guys who provide with 20% of our power, but it's very dirty. And about 1 month ago, there was this important report saying that they polluted one of the most important aquifers in the southern part of the island, and it's a permanent pollution. And the whole process has been, I'll say, polluted with ideology, because they're pushing for PREPA's privatization of the transmission and distribution system, openly saying that private is better, and we know that you can be private and good, and private and bad, and you can be public and good, and private and bad. And this new law does not impose corrective actions on damages caused by old coal plants, such as the one in Guayama I just told you about. And I was speaking in general, not about PREPA. I was speaking about the public policy. Now I'm speaking about PREPA. So PREPA is developing its new roadmap, which is the IRP. It establishes 24% renewable for 2038, 8 microgrids, eliminates coal, and implements energy storage. So I didn't speak about this before, so microgrids are important because you don't have to depend on the long transmission lines. You can generate near the point of consumption, and it's easier and faster to repair. And you can secure that, for example, critical areas such as hospitals will be able to get electricity after a major storm. And it is true that most solar panels may be affected by strong winds. And we saw that, but just in some areas in the southeast part of the island, there was a major utility scale solar farm who lost most of their solar panels. But in the other solar farms and the experience of people with rooftop solar systems, they were well installed. They didn't have any problem. They were ready to energize their homes. And it also allows for the expansion of new power plants with natural gas. I'm going to say something about this later. And on the same time, the privatization efforts are including the selling current power plants. And there's an RFP for energy storage. And this is only a small system, 180 megawatts for Bayamón, Carolina, and Humacao. And this will not be able to provide backup for the whole system, of course, but this will bring stabilize certain areas. And it is Tesla is competing here, AES and Fluence, which are major companies who work on utility scale storage. And As part of Title III, PREPA is in court trying to renegotiate its debt, and they're going to try to get better rates with the power purchase agreement of utility-scale solar farms. So natural gas did not solve the dependence on imported fuels. Okay, we don't have any natural gas at all. And for many people, the government's initiatives are not sufficient. This is last Sunday in the mountains in Adjuntas, Puerto Rico. They want a faster transformation, community-based and rooftop solar systems. And they want to make it right away, and I don't blame them because these are the people who live in the mountain and who spend the year without power. They cannot wait for PREPA to repair the system in a year. They need to save lives. They need to open business. They need to refrigerate insulin. They need to refrigerate milk, refrigerate food. So many people have been asking me, okay, so how do you pay for that? That's a great question. And first of all, not many people will be able to switch to that system because you need to pay for it. But it is already happening, okay? And people are making personal investments. Right after the hurricane, there are many NGOs who've provided with money and expertise. They are creating financial structures for upfront payments, and co-ops are beginning to give loans. Some part of the community development block grants can be used for developing community power systems. And of course, there's another important question. If many people defect the utility, what will happen with the utility? So it is true, like it'll mean further erosion of PREPA's finances as people and companies generate their own power, and but no one is talking about this, okay? And the current IRP that PREPA is preparing, it only allows for 10% of rooftop solar systems, and it is a possibility that PREPA will have more problems. But these people don't want to wait, and I don't blame them. And I found this Facebook post very, very interesting. I think it represents what people felt when they were without power. I like the concept of the word powerless because it's not about electricity. It's about how do you feel not being able to do your things. Like in this purgatory without electricity, I find myself obsessed with the notion of power. Having an experience of disempowerment, being without electricity or generation is a handicap, like having one hand tied behind my back or one eye covered. I think this represents what people felt. We're also speaking about political power. Slow response from the U.S. government after the disaster. So many people ask why the U.S. has to help Puerto Rico. So, and this is not political opinions, this is historical facts. And during the Hispanic-American War, Puerto Rico, the U.S. invaded Puerto Rico. And from 1898 to 1984, we had a military government and civil governors. They were appointed by the U.S. president. In 1948, it was the first time that we elected our own governor. And 5 years later, the current political status, Estado Libre Asociado, was created. And so if you translate this, Estado Libre Asociado, it means free associated state. The U.S. call it Commonwealth. So right at the beginning, we had a problem with definitions, which is going to be relevant in the next years to come. And under George W. Bush and Barack Obama, there were 3 task forces, and they studied the political situation of Puerto Rico. And they said, even though you voted in 1952 for the creation of the Estado Libre Asociado, this is not a permanent status. So it's up to the Congress to change the status. We even have power to transfer Puerto Rico to another nation. And also there was a big decision of the Supreme Court in 2016. It said that Puerto Rico lacks sovereignty. And we reached Promesa Bill, which is an important law passed by the U.S. Congress. And in order Puerto Rico could restructure its debt. And this bill is very controversial in the island because it creates a financial oversight board, and it's a board of 7 members appointed by the U.S. president, and they make all the decision of financial decisions of Puerto Rico. They operate with Puerto Rican taxpayers' budget, and since we didn't vote for them and they are taking most of the decision, we are back to 1948. Take a look at these figures. Poverty rate, 40% of the population live below poverty level. And also, this is the highest unemployment rate in the U.S. And so Donald Trump tweeted this a couple days ago. And what people did, of course, let's fact check him. So he said Puerto Rico got $90 billion for the hurricane. More money that has ever been gotten for a hurricane before. That's false. Hurricane Katrina, 120 billion. And for Hurricane Sandy, 60 billion. All right? So 41 billion have been allocated to the island. 19 billion are in the process of being dispersed, and only 11 billion have been dispersed. The energy sector, only 1.3 billion have been outlaid, and the energy sector needs more than 17 billion to implement rebuilding recommendations. And when I speak rebuilding recommendations, I'm speaking about a task force that was created a couple months after the hurricane, in which several utilities from the U.S., mainly New York Power Authority, got together with the Puerto Rico government and other federal and local government organizations to provide a roadmap to change the energy sector to make it more resilient. And speaking about politics down there, there are challenges between Governor Ricardo Rosselló administration and the U.S. Department of Energy, because Governor Rosselló is fighting against DOE because he says you're trying to control the recovery process. He wants to control the recovery process. Also, Governor Rosselló has to deal with these agreements with the Fiscal Oversight Board I told you about, which was created by Promesa Bill, and some U.S. Congress intervention in terms of political intervention. There were some U.S. senators and members from the House trying to quietly push for PREPA's privatization as an ideological measure. And I just want to say these political issues, the issues with Donald Trump, they are not being a constructive way. And we're speaking about a humanitarian issue. And about 6 months after the hurricane, I went to the mountains to, I was helping a French TV station to do reporting there. So we went into the woods and we saw people from PREPA taking the same line from the ground and put it on the same old pole. So what I'm trying to say is now 100% of PREPA customers have powers, but we have the same fragile old infrastructure that we had before the hurricane, and we are still vulnerable. And you know what? And on that positive note, I leave you with questions, if you have. Yes.
Where does Puerto Rico import its natural gas from? And specifically, has anyone calculated how much the Jones Act costs Puerto Rico in natural gas imports?
Yes. Puerto Rico imports from different places. Right now, they are importing it mainly from Trinidad and Jamaica. Okay. They're not importing natural gas from the U.S. because the Jones Acts say that if you want to transfer goods from one U.S. port to another U.S. port, and Puerto Rico is a U.S. port, you need to use U.S. flag vessels. And there are no U.S. flag vessels available at this moment to transport that kind of, that amount of natural gas. And the second part of the question, I'm not, I need to double check on that. I don't want to give you wrong information. Right. So Jones Act is right in the middle of the debate. Actually, the Congress is debating about this right now as we speak. Is it possible to make an exception for Puerto Rico and other U.S. ports to be able to use foreign flag vessels and move natural gas around? Yeah.
I'll ask a question. I try to get a feel for how much money is effectively owned per person resident of Puerto Rico, maybe just for the electricity sector. Do you have a feel for this? The PREPA has owed so much money. I don't know how much you know, and there's about, I think I looked up 3.2 million residents on Puerto Rico. I'm just trying to get a scale for how much money is owed by how many people, and whether that's even when you add up the number, if it's even sort of a realistic number.
Yeah, it's about 5,000 per person, but if many people keep going out of the island, so those who remain have to pay more, and it's the same with PREPA. If many people defect the utility, so those who stay with the utility have to pay more to be able to meet the debt payments.
Right, right. Yeah, $5,000, median income is $20,000, so it's a lot of money to spread over some amount of time for such a low income. So I'm trying to understand how much that is compared to something that would be normal, quote unquote normal here in on the large grids of the mainland or something like this. Any other questions? Or
there we go. You seem to have a sort of mixed opinion of the privatization of the utility grid. So what would be your personal sort of ideal between that? You know, what made some of it arbitrage to you, and what would be like sufficient privatization?
So my personal take about this is I should be able to generate my own power in my roof if I want to be resilient. Not only PREPA, the only one to generate. And if you are going to privatize PREPA or a part of PREPA, it's because you really did a study about why it is convenient, not by saying private is good, public is bad. That's my final take about that.
I'll come up here.
Also-
I'll make a,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
So when we speak about using rooftop solar systems and the participation of community, we're not speaking about eliminating the utility. We need a utility. For example, if you're a small business and you want to sell power to another business with wheeling, for example, you need the utility. You use their distribution lines. You pay them a small amount. And if you are interconnected to the utility through net metering, what if you had a problem with your solar system and storage? You want to be connected and get some power from a utility. So I don't think one thing excludes the other. We're not, the main policymakers are not speaking about that, so they can coexist.
Let me just follow up on that. So is the discussion in Puerto Rico to create something, or is this discussion not happening to create something similar to what we have here in Texas or other places that have competition to generate power, that there's a regulated part of the utility that owns the wires and then private companies compete, or potentially co-ops are providing power generation? Is that the discussion that's happening properly, or are you saying maybe this discussion is not happening properly, or this is one of the options on the table?
The discussion of co-ops, NGOs, private organization generating their own electricity and distributing their own electricity, it's happening, it's law. The effects of these new changes in the utility, they're not speaking about that. But it's already law, and there are many people generating already. For example, the organization who lead this is called Casa Pueblo. They're the first ones to have a radio station 100% energized with solar and storage. So the next movement is to energize several business in the town of Adjuntas. They're going to create their own microgrid. Okay, so I'm just saying this because this is not wishful thinking. It's already happening, right?
The discussion that's not happening is,
How is it going to affect the utility?
right, so do you have to basically pay for all of PREPA's debts or not? Is that the question, essentially?
Yeah.
Do the residents have to pay for this or not?
If you are connected to the grid, yes, you will have to pay. Even though you generate your own power and you're using PREPA, you still have to pay the debt when the next increases in the cost of kilowatt hour come. Does that answer your question? I think so. All right.
So related question, just on, you'd mentioned a 10% figure for solar, and I was trying to understand if that target, that was a discussion of just what PREPA's plans were as a targeted utility
This is
scale
only
hookup?
PREPA's plan.
Yeah, that's their side of the activity, okay.
They're still working on that.
Yeah.
I talked to the executive director of PREPA about 2 weeks ago. I said, but why are you putting a limit to rooftop solar systems? Only 10%? Is it because of the utility death spiral? Because it's going to affect your business? He said, no, we're not doing that. So then how are you going to do that? So he was not able to answer that question. At some points about this specific subject and about what I just said, that they are not discussing the effects on the utility, sometimes it seems that they're trying to repair the tire without stopping the car at some point. Yeah. But
I believe you just mentioned in passing that there's net metering
Yes.
for solar. So my question would be, with retail residential rates coming up on 26 cents a residential electric kilowatt hour, that should make solar immensely profitable
Yes.
for those that put it on their roofs. So
Yeah.
what are the remaining barriers?
So as it is right now, which is 22 cents kilowatt hours, if PREPA does not implement the increases, in about 5-10 years, people with rooftop solar systems will save about 1 to 2 cents. So in about 10 years, they will be saving about 10 cents. Maybe they will save more because the prices of solar and energy storage are decreasing in Puerto Rico, as in many places of the world. And so the main factor bothering the process is PREPA. And Governor Rosselló said that he's trying to work on that. Many people had to wait even a year in order to get interconnected to PREPA. You could have your rooftop solar systems there, but if you don't get the permit, your equipment is there. Like,
Well, I'm sure you might take a look at Hawaii sometime, particularly the island of Kauai, which is now a cooperative. And, Hawaii's incorporating much greater amounts of renewables and storage, and their rates are about like Puerto Rico. So there might be some useful information there.
yes, I agree. And as I said, like, these people are leading the way. They're not waiting for PREPA. So PREPA is going to have to accept that. Also, you have now the project of the Senate 1121, the new public policy bill. And if you want to meet those standards, PREPA has to make changes and be faster interconnecting people. Okay? And yeah, that's basically it. One thing that remains to be seen, and according to, remember I told you about the Fiscal Control Board? Their fiscal plan for PREPA literally states that if you want to defect the utility and being off the grid, you may have to pay a tax. Okay? So you need to serve the debt. It's not, they have not made that decision yet, but it's possible, right?
Do you have a feel for who owns, I guess in effect, owns PREPA, or who has invested, right? I'm guessing that the owners of the people maybe getting dividends from bonds or something paid back by PREPA are not necessarily living in Puerto Rico. Do you have a feel for this?
There are bondholders from Puerto Rico, from the U.S., from Wall Street. We've tried, like, the Center for Investigative Journalism have worked on that. And so in the end, you never know what happened, because when you're in debt, you have bad bonds. There are these financial organizations that come and they buy a certain amount of bonds, right? And for example, I was the original bondholder. Then they come, I sell it to them, and they keep selling. And in the end, you don't know who really owned the bond, but it's basically a mix of locals, people from the U.S., international organizations. Yeah. Was that your question? Yeah.
So I'll have two if no one follows up after the first one. So I know you said they're kind of back on the 10% solar push and a desire for distributed generation and microgrids. Does that inherently create, or does that really equate to better reliability for consumers in the end? Because oftentimes solar panels are just as destroyed by the end of a hurricane, whether it's through debris or hail or other things. Would they really be that much more functional, or is there some sort of sufficient weatherization for them?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned this. We have about 11 renewable projects, right, across the island. They're mainly in the south and the east. We have a big one in the metro area, and we have a huge one in the northwest part of the island. So this is a map only for fossil fuels, okay? But the biggest solar projects are here, 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 and here. Only this area, actually Hurricane Maria came through this path, okay? Only in this area they had almost 100% destruction. We had a wind farm here. It was almost 100% destruction. The rest, they were ready to energize. I was speaking about the owner of a utility scale solar project. He said, I only lost about 1% of my solar cells, right? I was ready to energize the system the next day of the hurricane. So many people who had rooftop systems, most of them, they had their, if you make a good installation of the solar panels, you need to make them ready to resist Category 5 hurricanes. Does that answer your question? It's not 100% windproof. Nothing is 100% windproof, right?
And then on the debt piece, so it's kind of largely known that the financial situation of PREPA pre-hurricane even wasn't ideal. How can you maybe give a brief history about how it got to that and sort of how that complicates further investment into PREPA right now? Because it seems like, or at least the story that I've heard is this tragic tale of financial mismanagement.
What was the last part?
Like, is it going to be able to really find sufficient financing or decent financing terms for future rebuilds, given that it doesn't really have a great debt history?
Yeah, so for the moment, PREPA and the central government and other public corporations, they don't have access to capital. And that's one of the main reasons of restructuring the debt and organizing the finances. So right now, PREPA is not even paying the debt while it goes to court. And so that answers one part of your question. The other one, why? It's just decades of mismanagement, like asking for money. Like we don't really know how they spend the money. It's not transparent. And we know that they didn't use the money to invest in infrastructure and to modernize it, to make it able to deal with a context of climate change, with a different context. They didn't do their job, right?
Thank you very much.
All right.